I'm Rachel.
And I'm Lauren.
Welcome back to Capital Conversations with Rachel and Lauren.
This week we'll be giving an update on the government shutdown and the 2025 elections. After that, we'll have an interview with Maxwell Frost.
Hi everyone, welcome back. It's definitely been a busy week. 2 weeks, and there's a lot of things and a lot of questions flying around the air, and I hope that we are able to answer all of them and give you guys kind of the rundown of what's happening in Washington, D.C. right now, what's happening with the members, is there any hope in sight? Who's to say, really?
Who's to say? I mean, all of y'all's questions are valid. Thank you so much for everybody that's been asking questions. I think
We've gotten a ton, so thank you.
This has been one of the weeks that I've been asked the most questions. I've gotten a bunch of texts from my friends and being like, what does this even mean? One of my friends texted me last night, how does the government shut down? I was like, that's so valid.
You're like, that's a great question. I've had not only family, but also people I went to high school with who just follow me on Instagram. Yeah. I don't usually put my work and my stuff on my personal, but for this time I was like, the government shutdown is one of those things where, for the most part, it's pretty apolitical when it comes to the consequences of a shutdown.
Yes.
And so putting it on my story, I was like, maybe I can help people from my hometown in Illinois figure out what's going on.
Totally.
I had so many people reach out and be like, thank you so much for this. Like, I sent your story to my mom.
Yes.
Like, your stories have been so good. So I just think it's a complicated situation right now because the government's shutting down. As we've kind of said in previous videos on the show and even on our social media, we've talked about, how a shutdown happens, and it's kind of a misnomer because the government doesn't just go dark, obviously. It's still trying to function. It's still trying to get those bills to the floor so they can fund the government. But I think, what do you think was the biggest question that we had to research this week and last week?
So we answered it on our social media in a short reel that we started. I honestly think that who the shutdown affects, because every shutdown affects different people, and different people win. So we were looking at when paychecks for the House staffers or the Senate staffers stop, when the Smithsonian's close, because federal buildings do close in a government shutdown, but right now those buildings are funded till somewhere like October 5th or October 6th. And so just kind of figuring out those specific dates, who's getting funded, who's getting furloughed, who's working and who's getting back pay is just different from shutdown to shutdown, because the last shutdown was a partial shutdown. And so I think that has been the most complicated, honestly, to grasp.
And I think it's been the hardest for regular everyday people to grasp. And a lot of people, and we've talked about this before, that in DC, we kind of feel like we're in this bubble and that what happens in the government stays in the government, it stays in the DMV area. But the government shutdown is one of those things where it slowly trickles down and it impacts everyone. I had a cousin reach out to me and be asking questions about TSA and asking questions about whether their vacation is going to be impacted. And I think that well, not only was that kind of cool to have little cousins reaching out to me asking about what I knew, but I think it's slowly starting to dawn on people that they can't just kind of turn a blind eye to the government anymore, and they can't turn a blind eye to the news, because the longer it stays in a shutdown, now granted, it's only been a shutdown for less than a week, but there is this still kind of calamity of, are we going to be in a shutdown for a really long time? Because the last one was, 35 days?
Yeah. I also think it's been really fascinating how people have found out about the shutdown. One of my best friends texted me, and she was the one that texted me asking about the shutdown. And before I could even ask, she knew me so well. She was like, this is how I found out. She was like, I knew you would ask how I found out that the government was shutting down. And it was a TikTok. And I opened the TikTok, and all the comments were like, this is how I found out the government's shutting down. This is how I found out the government's shutting down. And I think that's so indicative of how the media sphere is changing. There's no way that in 2019 or 2013 that many people were finding out about the government shutdown from social media.
Absolutely.
And, in relation to traditional media outlets, we're up here and we've been having a countdown for the government shutdown since March.
Yeah,
whereas
for real.
My friends are on TikTok hearing somebody sing about a government shutdown, and that's how they find out.
That's so crazy.
Just mind-boggling to where the world of media is going.
Well, and we on this show have said that I am not the most social media savvy of the two of us. I have to learn a lot from you. And when we were doing our On the Fly series on our Instagram, I was saying, we should do a long form video, have it be 3 minutes and make a reel. And Lauren was very kind and was like, we are not doing that. I was like, okay. So clearly there's, and then when we did 2 parts of it, and we did, just quick hits and quick stories. And that's how we got the idea for our On the Fly series, which we will be bringing up try to once a week of just the daily news. But I think this one was so perfect for it because
so perfect.
And like TikTok the videos can only be so long. And so I think people who are able to get that kind of instant gratification news, stuff like that really helps them understand a really complex issue in kind of a basic way.
Totally. And like people don't want to sit down and listen to a 10-minute video of why the government shut down. I think it feels easier for them to watch multiple. It feels less hefty and less like I'm watching a video for 10 minutes or I'm watching the news, which is really indicative of where our attention span at, which
maybe that's a bad thing. But we got to meet the people where we are. Mine is terrible too.
I will be the first to admit that I watch all my TikToks on 2x speed.
That's so insane.
Which is terrible. So Gen Z of me.
That's so Gen Z of you. And I'm over here still a Gen Zer, but I'm the one that's like, 50 minutes, let's go, press play. I think that it's quite insane though, because some of these podcasts that cover the government all the time are the ones that people are coming to now, because there are places like NPR. NPR has some of the best government-focused podcasts, and those are really lengthy. And a lot of people always say that, like, if you want to, fall asleep, like, put NPR in the background. It just soothes you, and not in a bad way, but just it's just so calming when they're describing stuff. But I feel like now people are racing to NPR more than ever because they're one of the kind of agencies that are losing federal funding, but surprisingly not because of the government shutdown. It's for another reason.
Yeah. So they used to be partially federally funded, them and PBS. And back in July, the House, the Senate, and the White House passed this thing called a rescissions package. It's pretty rare, but when President Trump came into office, he wanted to make all these cuts to the federal workforce, to the federal funding, just to claw back a lot of spending. That's a big...
the waste, fraud, and abuse, that line that people have been hearing a lot about.
That is like huge on Republicans' agenda, and part of the big ones that they really wanted to claw back was this funding for public broadcast. They believe that the public broadcasts like NPR and PBS are really pushing liberal ideologies. They brought in the CEOs into a hearing earlier this year that I sat through, and Republicans kind of tore them apart for liberal comments that they had made earlier in the year. But then Democrats argue back, and they're like, these stations are not just national politics, that they're reporting on liberal and Republican policies. They are in rural areas that provide news to a lot of people that aren't on social media, don't have Wi-Fi, just like their only source of network is public broadcast. They don't have cable. So you look at Alaska or places that are really rural, these communities really rely
on their local
NPR station or PBS stations to provide that information. And that's kind of where the Democrats push back on this, is that they're like, yes, you may see that on the national coverage, or yes, these CEOs have made these comments, but also like these are really important to people getting news all across the country. So last week, NPR cut off their funding for the first time ever from the federal government. Same with PBS. It's not just NPR, but NPR did a really big push to fundraise yesterday, and they have done a pretty good job at fundraising. The CEO, Catherine Mayer, did a meeting a few weeks back saying that they would have to claw back around $5 million in funding over the next year that they'll announce quarterly, just because donations don't always add up to what they were getting federally. So I think that we'll see cuts within these organizations like quarterly throughout the year. But this isn't necessarily something that's permanent. A rescissions package is just codifying cuts for that fiscal year, which essentially means putting it into law, because Congress did give this money to these companies to spend, and to claw it back, they have to do this thing called a rescissions package.
Right.
But it could be put into a fiscal spending bill, like
down
next year, or probably not next year because Republicans will still be in power, but down the road.
Yeah, and I think the rescissions thing is really interesting because at the beginning of the year, in March, there was a funding fight. And that was when we've talked about it, when Chuck Schumer helped Republicans push it over the line. That was kind of that era. And then we were in the era of rescissions. And people were like, why are we in a rescissions period right now? That was something that was also pretty rare that we haven't seen a ton of, this glorified in the media. And then we were in reconciliation, and then we were back to rescissions, and now we're in a funding fight again. And I think that all of this back and forth just shows how important all of these local media stations are, because so many people, we're only two people, like our goal is to get this out to people who are not in the traditional media scope or they don't understand stuff, but we're only two wonderful people. We cannot do everything, and And Lord knows other stations can't do everything. And so everyone kind of banding together and teaming up and being able to provide this news to those who are, like you said, don't have access to Wi-Fi handily, especially a lot of rural communities. And it's interesting, Democrats and Republicans have both pushed for like a broadband expanse.
Yeah.
And so I think that it's just these rescissions things. I remember when we were way back when talking about PBS and NPR, I talked to some Republicans who were either representing rural districts or their just state in general was having kind of this deficit of connections for their rural communities. And they had expressed that they were concerned about the impact. And a lot of them said, we don't care about the national broadcasting.
Yeah.
Like they were like, they are way too liberal. You know, that was their opinion. They said, but I know my people in local Nevada NPR.
Totally.
They are, you know, the sweetest people. They are so nonpartisan. Like they were really praising their local media. And so I think that that's why it's so important to see how these, not only the government shutdown will impact agencies that will trickle down into smaller communities, but things like rescissions is still not going away. So all the things that happened to us back in March and April, May and June, you know, now we're in October, but all of those are still going to come to this giant, you know, explosion on top of the fact that we are in a shutdown.
Yes. And I mean, if you really want to break it down, rescissions does come back to government funding.
Yeah.
So a rescissions, like I said, it cuts what the government funded at some point in time.
Right.
So now that we're in this funding fight, these Democrats are coming back and they're arguing, they're like, why would we negotiate with you in good faith if you're just going to send a rescissions package down the line to claw back that funding that we negotiated? So it kind of broke, not the Democrats ever trusted the Trump administration.
To begin with, right.
But I do think that the rescissions package did kind of break that barrier. Like we did see House Minority Leader Chuck Schumer vote with Republicans to fund the government back in March. The rescissions package came in July and it passed. And I think that since then, Democrats have been more wary than ever to negotiate on government funding because they're like, if we negotiate with you on this and you get what you wanted, majority of what you wanted, and we get some of what you want, some of what we want, you can just put together a rescissions package down the road and completely wipe that, which has been a really big complaint, and that's what's in the Senate Democratic continuing resolution that has failed multiple times now and will never pass. Let me just put that out there. But
sorry, Democrats, your bill is probably never going to get the support. I've had people ask me that. They've been like, is the Democrat one ever going to get there? No. Because Republicans hold the trifecta. And Republicans also have this take it or leave it mentality. They're like, we have a CR, it's clean. We won. Speaker Johnson actually said last week, he was like, there was an election and we won. And Republicans have said that, you know, we won the election. So our bill is going to be our bill. But this is Republicans' argument. You should get on board with us because at the end of the day, we need to be for all Americans and keeping the government open. But Democrats, kind of going back to what you said, they're arguing, well, you kind of do stuff without us anyway. So why would we help you keep the government open? This is your fight. And so that gets back into the messaging battle that we're seeing. And I think we had talked about this kind of in private, but it is interesting to see, kind of going back also to the social media thing, where messaging from both sides is so extreme right now.
I'm sorry, both sides. If I receive another email,
oh my God,
the influx of emails I've gotten since Monday on government shutdown
Who's reading
messaging.
These emails? I want like a detailed, maybe both sides, both campaign groups, we can sit down with you guys on a different day and we can find out who reads these emails. Because I actually am fascinated. I was thinking about that because we get these emails, right? And they're good for our reporting.
They are.
And so to actually be totally serious, who are reading these emails? Are you seeing an increase in people joining the party? Are you seeing people donating money?
Signing up for the newsletter.
And the reason I say that is because all of this messaging on social media is so fast and you're just absorbing so much that you kind of want to claw your eyes out. But again, we think it's so big because we're in the media market. I have so many people who are living in Iowa or living in Illinois who are big social media people, and they're still asking me what's going on with the government shutdown. So if they're not getting it from Twitter and they're not getting it from TikTok, then clearly something in the messaging is not pushing through. Like, is it only pushing through to the DMV? So I feel like, and that could be a conversation, I guess, for another time, but I think I'm curious to see whether voters are believing Republicans or Democrats. And that's something that we won't know for a while, because if the shutdown only goes for another week or so, you know, how long of a scope can you have to judge people's thoughts on it?
I kind of don't even know if it's a matter of people believing Democrats or Republicans. I saw some videos yesterday with a bunch of comments from people being like, why are we hearing so much talking and nothing is happening?
And
I was
fair.
like, that is
That's
actually,
fair.
I was honestly fascinated that the American people, that's what they were seeing, because like that's what we're seeing, but we're up close and personal.
Right.
It's always so fascinating to see like the side that people outside of the DMV get. And if they're the ones that are recognizing that both sides are really just like talking and fighting and messaging against each other.
And it's all for like clicks.
And truly not doing anything at this point in time.
It's going to make elections really interesting.
Yeah, like if people are realizing that both messaging is just kind of, I don't want to say, yeah.
It's kind of crap. I mean, I don't think, in my personal journalistic opinion, I don't think either side is winning the battle right now. I think that they both have the same messaging that they've had since 2024, the election. I think that they have just taken those messages and amplified them. And so if you believe the Republicans before, you're probably guaranteed to believe the Republicans now, and vice versa.
Yeah.
If you were on the support of the Democrats, you're probably going to believe the Democrats. The key group that I think that people should be doing more work on are independents or centrist Democrats or centrist Republicans, because that's the group of people where I think when you see polls, that's the majority of the American people. The American people majority are people who are in the middle. And that's that also ties into social media, because on social media,
it's just the loudest.
It's the loudest on the left and the right. But the majority of people who are living in these rural communities are in the middle.
Yeah.
And so how do you get your messaging to push through to those voters? Because at the end of the day, both parties are, and you can tell by the press conferences, both parties are scared that they're going to be blamed for this.
The amount of press conferences that have happened this week is...
There's too many.
Unprecedented. There's so many.
There's
every
so
day.
many of them.
And they say the same things. If we're going to be honest.
They do say the same things. And again, that's a messaging tactic. You know, the more you say it, the more then it'll stick in their brains. But again, that goes back to, is that working for anyone outside of your base?
Or is it kind of just going to cause voter fatigue?
It might. I mean, I'm tired. And it's only been a few days.
Like, I really do think that that's something to think about whenever you're messaging this hard, is that, like, voters get tired of hearing stuff.
And again, that goes back to what you were saying, that everyday people who don't pay attention to Washington are now seeing that everyone's just talking instead of acting.
Exactly.
And I think that that's going to be something that gets tested in a lot of elections, because we do have elections this year. You know, it isn't just the government shutdown that's happening. You know, we're coming up now.
In kind of major elections.
Yes, like in less than a month, there's going to be elections in Virginia, in New Jersey. Those are the governor's races, which we've talked about those before. Yeah. And then New York City, which I think New York City is the more flashy of the three.
Which I don't know if you feel differently. I've never seen a mayoral race that has gotten this much press. It is
much national attention. I covered the Chicago mayoral race back when I was a weed breaking reporter, and that was so fun because it's my hometown, shout out. But like that race was getting a lot of media attention because it was Chicago and because of crime and things like that. But there was not a ton of, it wasn't a huge combat between Republicans and Democrats, or even really the Democrat candidates either. When Brandon Johnson won, it was kind of like, it was a surprise, but it wasn't like, oh my gosh, he swept it in a landslide. Like, I think with the New York race, whoever wins, it's going to be a surprise. It'll be a surprise if the Republican upsets. It'll be a surprise if Zohran Mamdani wins just in general. And then there were more surprises literally a couple weeks ago.
But I mean, Mamdani has national name recognition now, which is wild for a new young candidate that has not even necessarily held a big office. Like, his name recognition from this race for where he's at in his career is
kind of nuts.
Like, yes, like kind of so fascinating to me, especially for somebody that is, who calls himself a socialist. I'm not just calling him a socialist. Yeah. For somebody who calls himself a socialist, his name recognition for somebody who has never held a big public office is wild. And he's running against a major candidate, former Governor Andrew Cuomo, and then was running against Eric Adams, who just recently dropped out of the race.
Which that was crazy. That was
wild.
It was a very interesting, it was a surprise, actually. I remember watching the video.
It was definitely a surprise.
And he talked a lot about how he was, he came from humble roots and he kind of followed the American dream into this life that he had. And so and when you finally got to like minute 3 of the video, it's when he announced that he was dropping out. And what is so and I don't want to say it's funny, but what's interesting about that is that he withdrew too late. So his name is still going to be on the ballot. So for people who are not paying attention to social media or paying attention to the news all the time, they might go to the ballot box and be like, oh, Eric Adams. And they don't even realize that they're voting for someone who's not in the race.
He's going to have great name recognition. He's been all around. I'm sure that everyone has, not everyone, but a lot of people have seen the Luigi Mangione pictures where he was walking with Eric Adams after he was getting arrested, which is kind of a wild political stunt for a mayor.
He had a lot of wild political choices.
That was pretty, he has a, honestly, I was surprised that he dropped out just by the sheer nature of who Eric Adams is.
Yeah.
He loves the spotlight. And I didn't really see that coming. But also, I mean, I don't really know what he was supposed to do with Mamdani doing so well.
Right, and he had said in his video that he wasn't receiving funds and he wasn't able to raise as much money because he was under investigation in a federal case and the federal campaign boards were not allowing it. He said a lot of things that were kind of restricting him from running a campaign that he wanted to.
Yeah.
But I think that also another thing that was kind of floating in the air that he did debunk, but I don't know, I think there could be some truth to it.
I agree.
Is that he was going to be potentially tapped for the Trump administration, which he did come out and his spokesperson said that's not true. And so I'm not, calling his spokesperson a liar, but I think the fact that that was even speculated in the first place was wild.
He was at inauguration, or invited at least.
At least.
At least he was invited to inauguration, but for a Democratic mayor is pretty wild. I think that him and Trump's somewhat relationship, whatever you want to call it, is pretty rare.
Like frenemies, friends of circumstance. I'm not even sure what you would call it. So,
I want to be a fly on the wall for
me too.
the two.
So I
want to be a fly on the wall a lot.
Me too. What I'm saying is I don't think that he's going to go to the Trump admin, but if he did, I wouldn't be shocked about it
at all.
Yeah, and I think that also happening not even far from New York is the New Jersey race. That's the governor's race between Mikey Sherrill and Republican Jack Ciattarelli, and that race has become so fascinating as well because the Congresswoman, she's a House member, she has been doing really well in these polls. And the Republican has come kind of within distance of her, but it's pretty much showing her on her average that she's about 8 points ahead. So she should be feeling pretty comfortable. But I think that the government shutdown, surprisingly, is going to be something that could potentially impact the race. Because I think all races, to be honest. I think I was reading something where it's 48,000 federal workers live in New Jersey. And so those already are going to be impacted by a shutdown. And again, we don't know how long it's going to last.
Totally.
But any shutdown is going to have impact on those workers. I mean, those are days going without pay. Some of them don't even have the job anymore. So that could be bad. And then there was a situation where they have decided to claw back funding for an project that would impact New Jersey. And we've seen a similar kind of now vocal battle between the Congresswoman and Trump that we saw way back when with Trump and Chris Christie when the same situation happened. And so I think that it kind of shows that history is repeating itself with the first Trump administration.
Yeah.
And the shutdown did not really go well for Trump's first administration. And so I think that also kind of goes back to what we were saying about the messaging battle, because Republicans, I think, are kind of more on the defense here, not only because they have the GOP trifecta, and as much as they say they're on the offense, they're the ones who have to hold on to the majority.
Yeah, and I mean, historically, a shutdown doesn't necessarily bode well for a president. Just historically, Trump has broken all political norms that we've ever seen.
Right, so who's even to say
that may not be the reality of this shutdown, but if we are looking historically, it does not go in the way of the president, typically.
Yeah, and so I think that could have an impact on Republican candidates. In Virginia, we're seeing that Winsome Earl Sears, she is coming within the margins of former Representative Spanberger. But again, that race also, those polls are not always indicative of the electorate. I think that Spanberger still has a little bit more of an edge over Sears right now, just because of the way that certain ads have played out and the kind of different controversies that have been cycling around just the campaigns in general. But again, Virginia's also, in the DMV, it is going to be heavily impacted by this shutdown. And that's going to factor heavily into the race, because if voters are thinking that it's Republicans' fault, Spanberger has done a pretty great job of trying to tie Sears to Trump. And Sears has also aligned herself with Trump and his policies. So shutdown, as much as they are loudly yelling at Democrats, I think Republicans have to be careful, because heading into these elections, it could totally just blow up in their face.
Totally. And I mean, with the 2025 elections next month, that's going to be so indicative of the 2026 midterms, which we talked to with Congressman Maxwell Frost in the interview coming up next. Well, welcome, Congressman Frost, to Capitol Conversations. We're so excited to have you here today.
Yeah, good to be on. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so we've had a busy few weeks and months since we returned from August recess. I know that both of us were in Omaha for the Won't Back Down tour, and I know that you did a bunch of tours like that, just going to Republican districts. How was that in August recess? And then looking forward to 2026, what do you plan on doing then? Like, I think that you started campaigning earlier than a lot of members that we've seen. And what are you looking forward to in 2026?
Yeah, well, it's been great. I mean, really, since the beginning of this year, I've been traveling the country and going to red districts and hosting these town halls. The turnout's been amazing, anywhere from 15 to 100 to 2,000 people each stop, mainly with Senator Murphy, but that one with Senator Warren was amazing. And it's really been, honestly, both enlightening and inspirational because we are seeing people who are watching the destruction of our country in front of their very eyes, the destruction of our healthcare, and this authoritarian government. And they are concerned and they want to know what can I do about it? And they have questions. And the districts we've been going to are districts where a Republican represents them in Congress, but hasn't held the town hall yet. So for many of these people, I'm actually the first member of Congress that they've either met ever, or the first member of Congress that they've gotten to ask questions to this
Mhm.
year. And so it's just been great to go out and tell people, look, when your Republican congressman isn't going to do their job, Democrats are going to step up to see what we can do to make sure everyone's represented, no matter who you are and no matter what your party registration is. On the campaign side, yes, I'm one of the very few members of Congress that believe in and do what's called year-round organizing. What does
Mhm.
this mean? It means I never turn off my campaign. My organizing director is the same person who helped me get elected back in 2022. She never left my campaign like most campaigns do. They wind down the door knocking until
Mhm.
the next election comes if they have one. I don't care if I have a very competitive election or not. We're knocking doors all year round. Not only that, but it's really important that we build up the bench of political operatives, but also people who are going to run for office. So I have
Mhm.
cohorts of organizing fellows that I pay. Yes, it's like their job. I pay them to learn how to work on a campaign, and then they actually go out and run canvases, get volunteers together. If they happen to be in the fellowship during my music festival, they will help us plan the music festival and work it. If it's during Pride, they help us do that. Like they are part of my campaign, and we do it to teach them what it means to be on a campaign so that way we can build that next generation up. This past summer, we hired 30 organizing fellows for the summer, anywhere from high school age to college age. And I'm really proud of that. And I work really hard at making sure we have the resources to do that and make sure I get reelected too.
I
And
think
that's really
that.
interesting because I think that what a lot of younger people are still struggling with is that they don't think that they can make an impact in politics. And a lot of people think that they don't have to even really pay attention. I feel like
Yeah.
Lauren and I get questions all the time, and I'm sure you do as a member of Congress, either in your district or in other districts, where they want to know just how basic things work, like the structure of the government. They want to know how a
Yeah.
committee works. But then they
Mhm.
also, kind of on the flip side of that, don't really know what they themselves can do to
Yeah.
stay active. So when you are talking to young people, whether it's your fellows or whether it's just voters, what is kind of your advice to them to stay, active, to stay involved? And,
Yeah.
maybe one party or the other doesn't matter, just to be engaged.
Oh, 100%. The thing I always tell people when they ask me, what can I do to get involved is like I rattle off some tactics, some different things you can do, but I always tell them the most important thing I can tell you is find a group locally that is doing the work that you're passionate about and join them because they will be able to answer the question you just asked me every day and at home. And that's what organizing really is about. There's that famous Cesar Chavez quote where he said where they get asked by the press, what does it mean to organize? And he goes, well, you talk with one person, then another person, and then another person, and then another person, right? And that's what organizing is all about. And for me, I think about my kind of organizing career since I was 15 years old, and the fact that I've been involved in the gun violence prevention movement since then. This is a movement that is very traumatic,
Mhm.
that the times where the most people give a damn about what you're doing has to do when people are getting shot and killed in schools or wherever. And I always think about like, why did I do that for so long? How did I do that for so long? And it's really the community you build and the fellowship you build with those around you. There would
Mhm.
be no civil rights movement if it wasn't for the community and fellowship of people congregating and coming together and supporting one another and loving one another, right? And it's the same thing in the labor movement, in the indigenous movement to protect water and land. All these movements, a core basis of it isn't just one prolific leader. But it's the fact that it's groups of people who kept coming together and keeping each other inspired in that fight. And that's what I always encourage, especially young people, to do locally as well. And a lot of times politicians get very territorial and like very, is ego driven on like where you drive people to. But I think something that's important to know is everybody's gonna have a different political home. And what's important to me, I mean, I'd love everyone to just be with my campaign. I'd love everyone to do that. But I know that it's going to be different for everyone. Some people will want to do that. Some people might want to do something else. Some people might want to organize with Sunrise Movement or the Dream Defenders or a local mutual aid group, or maybe they're an artist and they want to focus on something like that. It's going to be different for everyone. That's why at my music festival, Mad Soul, instead of just directing people to my campaign and the Democratic Party only, you'll see 25 to 30 booths of completely different organizations from all across Central Florida. And I know that I might, be kind of losing someone to another organization if they go there and that connects with them a little bit more. But I don't feel like I'm losing anyone because we're all still part of this movement, which is fighting for the same thing. And I think that's really important is we have to see ourselves as a part of the same movement. And honestly, this is something that we've seen the right, I think, understand in a way that we haven't quite gotten to yet, and I hope
Mhm.
we do. And you see it with Turning Point USA. I mean, when I was traveling the country for Kamala Harris, I remember being in Arizona. I got pulled into a meeting of campus organizers, and like the lead organizer was like, "Can you inspire them? They feel like really depressed and down." And granted, this is before we lost. So I'm traveling the country. I'm hype. I'm like, why are they not feeling good? We're about to win this campaign. This is like crazy. So I go inside and I'm like, hey guys, what's the matter? Or no, it's virtual. I say, what's the matter? And they all go Turning Point USA. And I'm like, what do you mean? And they're like, well, they're out there hosting like the biggest parties on campus and the biggest events on campus and all this stuff. And we're giving out pizza at the student union, asking people to sign commit to vote cards. And it just feels like we're not, it feels like we're being overshadowed. And it really, and I would talk to a lot of people about Turning Point and other affiliated groups, is that on a lot of these college campuses, it's not the college Republicans that are really, bringing in people and kind of radicalizing people and putting them to action. It's the affiliate groups that are connected, but are not directly connected. And I think part of this has to do with the fact that a lot of young people are disillusioned by the two-party system. And so they're maybe less likely to join a college Democrats or a Republican Democrats and more likely to join a Turning Point USA or Sunrise Movement or something like that. And I think that's part of the reason we have to bring organizations more in and coordinate more on the work that we do because we're all working towards the same thing. And that's no flack to the college Democrats because I love them and they do amazing
Mhm.
and it's growing. But even the college Democrats would tell you, and leadership there would tell you that it is about building coalition with everybody within our movement. And when we do that and we're okay with people belonging to different political homes, that's how we're going to build power to actually win.
Yeah, you talked about how Republicans did that well in the last election specifically. Have you kind of found that other members of Congress, with you being the youngest, that they come to you and they ask you how to do that? Have you kind of been that source and that like idea spawn for them?
Yeah, the young people plug.
Hmm. Yeah, pretty
Yes.
Um,
much.
not full. I mean, I'd say there's a lot of people they probably go to, but yeah, I get asked this question all the time by a
Hmm.
lot of different people in politics, and I always tell them the exact same thing I told you. And then I invite people to come to Mad Soul, and I'm like, you can come check out what we do, and just how different it is, and the fact that we're this whole event that we've based is kind of a microcosm of the organizing that I do on my campaign. Like you might ask, okay, so you knock doors year round. What are you telling people? Well, we're not telling people I'm a volunteer at Maxwell Frost. Go vote for Maxwell Frost
Hmm.
2 years from now.
Right.
We're knocking on doors and we have different tracks. Like if there's a hurricane coming, we're going to dispatch volunteers out to do hurricane preparedness knocks, right? We did that
Oh,
last year.
Yeah.
interesting.
We talk to people about where they can get resources. They'll know they're from my campaign because they're wearing my shirt, or they'll say I'm a volunteer at Maxwell Frost campaign, but we're
Yeah.
here to talk to you about hurricanes. Or, for instance, just endorsed a school board candidate a few weeks ago. my organizers this week are out there knocking doors for her. And they'll talk about me too, but we're doing these joint canvases because her election is just in a couple months. So it's all different. Like we are not doing the typical thing, you do on the campaign. And I think that's part of the reason why we've been able to build a really good movement in Central Florida. And it's not just credit to me. We have like local legislators as well that believe this too, that literally they work at raising more money than maybe they need to raise to stay in their
Mhm.
seat because they want to fund their own year-round organizing. And we all do this together. And in fact, when I first started, we found that kind of had a lot of the same people. Like someone would do their fellowship, and that same group of people do my fellowship, and then someone else's fellowship, and it was the same group. And so what we started doing is intentionally advertising this stuff to non-political people. And for instance, that
Mhm.
group of 30 that I had this last cycle, only two of them were like known quantities in the local political world. The rest of them
Mhm.
were like, I've never knocked a door in my life. I've never been to a political event ever, but
Mhm.
like I know who you are, and I'm like, the work you do, I like it. And I saw this on social media, or, we sent it to a lot of professors at UCF and said, I don't care if your class is to do with politics, tell your students about this. And we got a lot of new people. And guess what? Most of them, if not kind of all of them, I think, even though they're not on my fellowship, I still see them at events all the time. They're like plugged in now.
That's so fascinating. I think something that you said that not only in your camp, like you're working on your campaign, but you're also helping other people on maybe some unrelated things like hurricane relief or things like that.
Yeah.
And I feel like if a lot more people in the Democratic Party, even in the Republican Party, like I think if more people started doing that, I think you would start to see people not consider Washington to be this abstract idea that they can never
Yeah.
reach, that they can be activists and
Mhm.
organizers in
Yeah.
their own
Yeah.
communities. And I feel like you, and unfortunately it came from such a horrific event, but I feel like you really were able to do that. And after the events and like the school shootings, that you were able to take this kind of feeling that everybody was having. And it wasn't even really about politics. It was about coming together, and it was, gun
Yeah.
violence and ways to combat it. And then I'm curious, after the death of Charlie Kirk, we've seen a lot of young conservatives now who are thinking that they want to get into politics because, they saw somebody that they really admired get killed by gun violence. They want to jump in. And
Mhm.
obviously, conservatives and Democrats have had a different idea objectively on how to approach gun violence. Do you see a pathway where potentially, maybe next cycle or in 2028, if some of these younger conservatives like yourself are kind of being elevated by this horrible act of gun violence, do you think that there's a way that maybe you and Democrats could find a way to kind of come together and maybe finally get somewhere on like bipartisan gun violence solutions?
Possibly. It's hard to tell. I mean, so many Republicans here I've spoken with that do want to do something on gun violence. I know because they've told
Mhm.
me privately, but then they say I can't because of Trump and the NRA, and I'm worried about my primary, and so I can't do
Interesting.
anything on that. We've seen some glimmers of hope, as many of you know. My first bill was to start the Office of Gun Violence Prevention, which President Biden started using my bill as the foundation for the executive order. And a few months after the office opened, Marjorie Taylor Greene got a bill on the floor to defund the office. I think I found out like 2 hours or 3 hours before. So I went out and I spoke with about 10 different Republicans to explain to them why this office is important, not for Democrats, but for like everybody.
Mhm.
And the office was saved. Her bill was voted down because I think it was 7 or 8 Republicans voted with us. And actually, if you guys were both around last Congress, you know that there was rarely any bills that 7 or 8 Republicans voted with
Mhm.
Democrats on,
Mhm.
even that number, if it unless it was tearing apart their own speaker. So that was a glimmer of hope, I think, and possibly. But my worry is this, that I'm worried that people will be, that a lot of the people and young conservatives that are in, I guess, their call to action was the horrific assassination and murder of Charlie Kirk, that they come here with a set of solutions which will actually make things worse.
Mm,
And the fact of the matter is the conservative policies on gun violence prevention have made us less safe and have killed more people, and our policies work. And I know this is like, well, you're a politician, you're going to say that, but it's like in the numbers too. I mean, it's like it's not even some political talking point. I mean, we passed the, Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, which is only bipartisan because what, one or two Republicans voted for it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really Democrats that passed the Safer Communities Act, which put insane amounts of money towards ending gun violence, towards holding accountable people who are flooding our communities with guns and mental health services, which is the thing Republicans say all gun violence is about. Okay, well, we did it. We put money towards mental health. And then we got the Office of Gun Violence Prevention. And over the last 3 years, gun violence has gone down the most that it ever has in our nation's history.
Mm-hmm.
And now they're undoing a bunch of it. So it's going to go up again. So, I mean, like, it's in the numbers. We know what needs to be done. There's some issues where we still need to brainstorm and figure things out. Gun violence is not one of them. We don't need to think about anything. We know what works. We just need to do it.
Mm-hmm. I think that's interesting too because it's become it's been a heavy topic, I feel like, since I was in maybe end of high school into college. And now I feel like, and Lauren and I have discussed this, that it's become so prevalent now and it's become almost just a norm that you see it every day. And one of the things that kind of got obscured was that when this horrific assassination of Charlie Kirk happened, there was a school shooting happening at the same time.
Yeah.
And that didn't really get as much attention as the Charlie Kirk assassination. And I think that that was just so indicative of where we are as a culture that, and I think I even saw like on social media, even some Republicans were saying, oh, like, there's a school shooting and no one cares about it. And like, I think a lot of people on the Democratic side were hoping this is going to wake Republicans up to the nature of gun violence. What do you think about that? Do you agree with that? Do you think that maybe some of these horrible events can be kind of spurned down the line into something that could be positive for everybody?
I used to, but I don't think that anymore because I've asked myself this question since I was 15 years old, you know. Oh, this has to be the one. Like, I walked into a nightclub in my own community, a mile from where I work, and murdered 49 people because they're gay. This has to be the one. No. Oh, somebody walked into a high school in a rich community, Parkland, Florida, and murdered a bunch of kids there. This has to be the one. No. A Republican leader was shot during a baseball practice. He was shot himself. This has to be the one. No. So you know, I think we have to just get rid of a lot of these politicians, like get them out of office and to get people in office that are actually willing to do something about it. And unfortunately, that's what's going to have to happen there. Donald Trump has really destroyed a lot of bipartisanship. I mean, just look at Congress now. We're not passing any bills like at all. It's damn near impossible to work on the scope of what a bipartisan win is has diminished so much over the last 4 decades that now people are like, yeah, we worked together in a bipartisan way. We worked together on the post office thing. When if you go back a long time, if you go back, bipartisan wins used to be a lot more substantial.
For sure.
But now because it's been diminished so much, and I really, and I'm not just on some partisan stuff. I think Donald Trump has brought the worst out of everybody, and I think he's really killed a lot of bipartisanship in this country. Now the scope of what a bipartisan win is and can be has just gone so low. The thought of a bipartisan gun bill, a bipartisan healthcare bill, is just like such a figment that it's almost, I always tell people, unfortunately, this fantasy of a bipartisan immigration reform is just not going to happen, at least in the immediate future. And so Democrats, we have to put our own thing forth and then pass it when we have power. And that just is what it is. And it's unfortunate, but that is the situation. Look, a fourth of my bills were bipartisan last Congress. My two bills that actually got through the House floor were bipartisan. Like I believe in it, but as an observer, the scope is a lot smaller than it once was.
Yeah, my dad always points that out. I'll write a story and the headline will be like, bipartisan bill, and then it'll be like all Republicans and 2 Democrats. And he's like, it's not bipartisan if only 2 are voting for it. Like that's just the 2 that are spraying.
No,
and
literally.
My dad like feels so passionately about us. I mean, we technically have to because technically with AP it is bipartisan, but my dad gets so frustrated with it. But I know that we have a busy schedule today and the rest of the next few weeks, so I don't want to keep you too long, but thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Welcome to our Q&A section where we answer questions from the viewers and the listeners, our favorite people in the world. And surprisingly, actually not, I think unsurprisingly, there are still a lot of questions about the shutdown that we are ready to answer for you.
I mean, even after we just talked for like half an hour straight about it, we still have
There's
more
always
to talk
more
about.
questions.
So tell me a little bit about the state of play with the shutdown right now.
Yes, this one comes from a listener, Ainsley. We appreciate the question. And the state of play right now is that the Senate is coming back today, and they are going to be voting once again on the GOP's continuing resolution, on the Democrats' continuing resolution. As of right now, they are projected to fail. They failed last week, and we are now going to be on the fourth time that we are voting on these bills. And so I think what the state of play is right now is that we're kind of in this standstill where Republicans are saying that this bill is the best you're going to get. They're trying to pitch it as you're simply just moving the ball further. There's nothing else to it. And it includes money for member security and security for the executive branch, the judicial branch, and things like that. But on the whole, there's not much that is different. But Democrats are arguing that this is the time now for us to come to a negotiation about funding, because in reconciliation, you clawed back trillions in Medicaid funding, an IRA and things like that. And so right now they're at this kind of, you do this, no, you do this kind of thing. And as I said earlier, Republicans have said, we won the election, so this is what you're going to get. You guys are in the minority. You have a duty to keep the government open. And then Democrats are saying, we have a duty to fight you. Just because you guys are holding the trifecta doesn't mean that we can't put up a fight. And that's what and we've talked about that before, that's what their base wants.
Which, that is something I do want to touch on a little bit. I think that that's something that isn't necessarily explained that often. Why, at this point in time with this bill, why is this when Democrats push back? And the answer is that it's really the only point in time in it, not only trifecta, but in the minority that they can push back. Yeah. Because the government has to be funded or else we end up in a shutdown like we're in right now. But the Senate does have that 60 vote threshold. So government funding is really the only point in time where Democrats have any wiggle room to get even the slightest win in the entire 2 years of a Congress, which is kind of huge. They have what's supposed to be 2 times to do that, but since we have continuing resolutions, it ends up being a couple more.
Yeah.
But for Republicans to get these CRs passed or appropriations bills passed, they have to work with Democrats. And it's really the only point during a trifecta that they have to work with the minority, and the minority now being Democrats, which is why Democrats are pushing back so hard. This is the only opportunity for them to do anything they want in the next 2 years and maybe even 4, depending on 2026.
Yeah, and I think that right now what we're looking forward to this week, maybe not looking forward to, but what's happening this week is that there's going to be the same as there was last week. It's going to be press conference after press conference. It's going to be messaging. It's going to be a lot of failed votes until the bill can either be amended or there's some sort of verbal or written agreement. But also there's a couple caveats to that. As I said earlier, Johnson has said he doesn't want to negotiate. That Republicans, there's nothing to negotiate. We're in the majority. We're not negotiating anymore.
And we've seen how far written promises have gotten people this Congress. In reconciliation, I think that there was a lot of promises broken. I don't necessarily know if they were written, but if I were a Democrat, I wouldn't bank on a
I wouldn't bank on a verbal. I wouldn't bank on a written. And that's what Democrats have argued. Also, they've said, we want something ironclad in writing. But also, again, like we said, during reconciliation, we saw a lot of written things kind of fall to the wayside. So I think that right now what people need to be wondering is, what is still open, what's happening. And I wrote some of them down so I don't get any of them wrong. But among the things that are still being funded right now, you have Social Security, you have the Veterans Affairs, you have DHS. And so that includes also TSA. So if anyone is flying and they need to get somewhere, my advice is get to the airport early. If you're my parents and you're watching this, you're laughing because I never get to the airport early.
I don't either.
But I'm suggesting it because I think that will just, take a breath, make you feel better. You might see delays in your flights, maybe even some cancellations. It's not because of the shutdown your flight is getting canceled. It's just the air traffic control. We're already seeing a lot of problems with flights. That's for a whole other episode. I could rant about my flying experiences. But I think that right now what people need to realize is that life for the most part is going to stay the same. It's just some federal buildings are going to be closed, and you might just see a lot of backlog on whether it's your own pay, whether it's benefits, or whether it's you trying to get from point A to point B.
And I mean, with TSA, since they are essential workers, they do have to show up for work and they will get back pay. But I mean, if you're not currently getting paid and you're not receiving a paycheck and you're struggling to meet rent, I can see where people do not want to show up for work.
Yeah,
and so
understandable.
that's where those delays come from. The delays don't come from them not coming into work. It comes from people not being incentivized to go to work.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, and our next question is from Ashlyn, and she asks, how much of your job is social media? And I think last week we proved that it is quite a bit.
It is a lot. And it's kind of like a full-time job, which is crazy because you see people working for companies that do social media. That's their whole job. But our job is to, one, report, but also to have people read our reporting, we have to push it out.
Yes,
and
boost content, things like that.
Which is another thing of how traditional media is changing into this new media.
Which is why we have her, because I wouldn't know anything about that.
But I think that now with so many different platforms, like we're pushing on TikTok, we're pushing on Instagram, we're pushing on Twitter, we're pushing on Reels, we're pushing on anything that we can. She's much better at X than I am. I'm not a big X person, which is arguably the biggest social media platform for reporters. I think that TikTok and Instagram are definitely opening up to that. But that is where political junkies get their news. They get their literally minute by minute coverage.
Instant
and Rachel
gratification.
is incredible at following things minute by minute on X. And then, I mean, you're looking at, we did Reels last week on government shutdown. I'm sure we'll have more for y'all this week.
Yeah.
But those take time too. Like, that is not part of our everyday work that we are turning in. That's not part of the stories that we're writing. We're writing our stories, running out in front of the Capitol, filming a video, running back in, finishing up a story, editing it. I posted it on my walk home yesterday.
Yeah. And it's something that we just decided to do on the fly. And I think when we were discussing, we were thinking, which is why we named it on the fly.
Yes.
Because we were thinking, you know, what are people thinking about right now? And people have a lot of questions. And you had mentioned that people and friends were going to TikTok to get their answers. And we were like, well, we have TikTok, we have Reels, we could be those answers. And so literally we went outside and we sat on the Capitol steps and for maybe, 30 minutes, just walked back and forth and filmed these videos. We had a couple of police cameos, Capitol Police cameos in the background, so hope they enjoyed that. But I think that it was a great experience, not only for us to learn how to, well, I don't know if I should say us, for me to learn how to do social media on the fly and how to create that stuff, but also I think for us in general just to boost content, because we want you guys to not only see our stuff, you know, for us as a shameless plug, but also for us to be able to bring that information about Capitol Hill to you.
I think that also it kind of is necessary, and the amount of work that we're doing to follow politics so closely, we want it to benefit as many people as possible. And I'm just gonna like reality check both of us on this. Like, our Reels that are 3 minutes long talking about the government shutdown are getting thousands of views. I doubt our stories are getting that.
No, probably not.
So I do think that it is necessary, like, just to push our work and push how hard it is, like how much work we're putting in to cover it this closely to like get people to watch it, because traditional media is declining.
Absolutely, and I think that that's why it's important to not only have your written word, but your visual word at the same time.
Yeah.
I always thought that how I would never come in front of a camera, and I hated that idea. I hated the idea of being an anchor. I hated the idea of being on camera like this.
Like you now.
Look at me now. And people bring that up to me all the time. They're like, you said you would never do that. And I said, honestly, I never set out to do it, but I think the fact that not only, and I think meeting you as well, because you have been so great about being online and being present that way, I think that that's not only made me grow as a journalist, and hopefully vice versa.
Yeah,
so.
No, it's been awesome. I feel like we complement each other in really good ways in reporting styles for sure.
Absolutely, agreed.
Yeah, well, that's a wrap. Thanks for watching Capitol Conversations with Rachel and Lauren.
And make sure, as always, to like and subscribe, follow us. We're on Spotify now. Add that podcast to your playlist or whatever you do on there. And as always, make sure to follow our work and others at WashingtonExaminer.com.